You tell yourself it's love, but your body knows better. Your stomach churns when their name appears on your phone. Your heart races not with excitement, but with something darker, something that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff in a storm. You wake up exhausted from dreams you can't remember, carrying a weight that doesn't belong to you. And yet, you cannot leave. You cannot even imagine leaving. This is not romance. This is not connection. This is something far more ancient and far more dangerous. What you have mistaken for love is a trauma bond, and it is slowly consuming you from the inside out. But here is what they don't tell you about trauma bonds. They feel like destiny. They feel like coming home. They feel like the most important relationship you have ever had, and that is precisely why they are so deadly. The mind that has been wounded seeks not healing but familiarity. It seeks the echo of its original pain, dressed up in the costume of intimacy. You who have found yourself here, drawn by some unnamed recognition, you are not weak. You are not broken. You are not choosing poorly. You are responding to psychological patterns that run deeper than conscious choice, deeper than rational thought. You are caught in the grip of something that masquerades as love, but feeds on your very essence. And unless you learn to recognize the signs, unless you understand the mechanics of this dark alchemy, you will remain trapped in a cycle that promises connection but delivers only depletion. The trauma bond is not a relationship. It is a psychological prison with invisible bars, and the key to your freedom lies in learning to see what has been hidden from you. Tonight we descend into the underworld of attachment, into the shadow realm where love and harm dance together in a waltz that never ends. We will explore the 7 signs that you are not in a relationship, but in a trauma bond, and more importantly, we will illuminate the path that leads you back to yourself. But first, you must understand this. What you are experiencing is not rare. It is not shameful. It is not a reflection of your worth or your intelligence. Trauma bonds are as common as they are invisible, as powerful as they are misunderstood. They form in the spaces between safety and danger, in the moments when our nervous system cannot distinguish between threat and intimacy. They are the result of a heart that learned to love in the presence of fear, and they persist because they feel like the only love we know. The person who has captured your attention, who has become the center of your universe, is not evil. They are not a monster. They are most likely as trapped as you are, caught in their own web of unconscious patterns and unhealed wounds. But their unconscious and yours have formed a dark marriage, a union that feeds on chaos and thrives on intensity. Where healthy love creates expansion, trauma bonds create contraction. Where healthy love offers choice, trauma bonds demand surrender. You may be wondering how you ended up here. How did someone who values love, who seeks connection, who believes in the goodness of the human heart, find themselves in a dynamic that feels more like warfare than romance? The answer lies not in your recent choices, but in your earliest experiences of attachment. The child who learned to read the emotional weather of their caregivers, who developed a 6th sense for danger, who discovered that love often came with conditions. That child grows up to be an adult who is exquisitely attuned to the needs of others and dangerously disconnected from their own. This is not your fault. This is adaptation. This is survival. But what serves a child in a chaotic environment becomes a liability for an adult seeking genuine intimacy. The hypervigilance that once kept you safe now keeps you bonded to those who activate it. The people who make you feel most alive are often the ones who make you feel most afraid, and your nervous system, trained in the art of crisis, mistakes this activation for attraction. The trauma bond operates on a simple but devastating principle: intermittent reinforcement. Just as a gambler becomes addicted to the slot machine, not because it always pays out, but because it sometimes does, you become addicted to the person who gives you just enough love to keep you hoping, just enough pain to keep you fighting, just enough promise to keep you believing that if you just try harder, love more completely, sacrifice more of yourself, you will finally receive the consistent love you crave. But here is the cruel truth. The trauma bond is not designed to resolve. It is designed to perpetuate. It feeds on your hope, your loyalty, your capacity for love, and it gives back just enough to keep you invested, but never enough to satisfy your deepest needs. You become a person who lives in the space between promise and fulfillment, between hope and despair, between connection and abandonment. You become addicted not to the person, but to the cycle itself. The first sign you are in a trauma bond rather than a relationship is this: you feel like you are constantly walking on eggshells, but you have convinced yourself this is normal. You have learned to read their micro-expressions, to anticipate their moods, to adjust your behavior based on subtle shifts in their energy. You have become a master of emotional weather prediction, and you tell yourself this is what love looks like. This is what caring means. This is what being a good partner requires. But healthy love does not require you to be a mind reader. Healthy love does not demand that you shrink yourself to fit someone else's emotional limitations. Healthy love does not ask you to become invisible when the storm clouds gather. In a healthy relationship, you can be yourself without fear of retaliation, without the constant anxiety that one wrong word, one misunderstood gesture, one moment of being human will result in withdrawal, punishment, or rage. The second sign is equally insidious. You find yourself making excuses for their behavior, not just to others but to yourself. When friends express concern, you hear yourself saying things like, "You don't understand them the way I do," or "They've been through so much," or "They don't mean it" when they say those things. You have become their defense attorney, their translator, their public relations manager. You have taken on the exhausting job of protecting their reputation, while your own sense of reality slowly erodes. This is not loyalty. This is not understanding. This is not love. This is a sign that you have become so enmeshed with their experience that you can no longer see clearly. You have confused empathy with enablement, compassion with complicity. You have learned to see their pain as more important than your own, their needs as more valid than yours, their emotional state as your responsibility to manage and maintain. The third sign manifests in your body before your mind recognizes it. You are constantly exhausted, but you cannot understand why. You sleep but do not rest. You eat but are not nourished. You smile but feel hollow. Your energy is being drained by the constant hypervigilance required to maintain the relationship. Your nervous system is stuck in a state of chronic activation, always ready for the next crisis, the next emotional storm, the next moment when you will be called upon to fix, soothe, or save. This exhaustion is not the tiredness that comes from healthy effort or productive work. This is the bone-deep weariness that comes from living in a state of constant emergency. Your body is trying to tell you something your mind is not yet ready to hear. This is not sustainable. This is not love. This is survival masquerading as devotion. You may notice that you feel most energized when you are away from them, most like yourself when you are not in their presence. But instead of recognizing this as a sign of incompatibility, you interpret it as evidence of your own weakness, your own inability to love fully. You tell yourself that if you were stronger, more evolved, more capable of love, you would not need space. You would not crave silence. You would not dream of a life where you could breathe freely. But your need for space is not a weakness. It is your soul's attempt to preserve itself. It is your inner wisdom trying to guide you back to yourself. The fact that you feel more alive when you are alone is not a sign that you are incapable of love. It is a sign that what you are experiencing is not love at all. The fourth sign appears in the way you think about the relationship. You find yourself obsessing over it, analyzing every interaction, replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, trying to solve the puzzle of their behavior. Your mind has become a detective agency, constantly gathering evidence, building cases, looking for clues that will help you understand how to make things better, how to make them love you consistently, how to finally achieve the peace you seek. This mental preoccupation is not the natural curiosity that comes with healthy love. This is the anxious rumination that comes from living in uncertainty, from never knowing where you stand, from never feeling secure in the connection. Your mind is working overtime because your nervous system is trying to predict and prevent the next emotional injury. You are living in a state of hypervigilance that masquerades as caring but is actually a trauma response. In a healthy relationship, you think about the person you love, but you do not obsess over them. You wonder about their day, but you do not analyze their every word for hidden threats. You care about their well-being, but you do not make their emotional state your full-time job. You have mental space for other things, other people, other interests. You have a life outside of the relationship, and that life feels full and meaningful. The fifth sign shows up in how you feel about yourself when you are with them. You notice that you have become smaller, quieter, less vibrant than you used to be. You have learned to dim your light to avoid triggering their insecurities. You have learned to minimize your successes to avoid their envy. You have learned to suppress your needs to avoid their anger. You have become a ghost of who you once were, and you tell yourself this is what love requires. But love does not require you to disappear. Love does not demand that you become less so that someone else can feel more. Love does not ask you to sacrifice your essence on the altar of someone else's comfort. Real love celebrates your light, encourages your growth, delights in your success. Real love wants you to be more yourself, not less. You may have noticed that other people in your life comment on how you have changed, how you seem different, how you do not seem like yourself anymore. But instead of hearing this as valuable feedback, you dismiss it as jealousy or lack of understanding. You tell yourself that you are evolving, that you are learning to be more considerate, more selfless, more loving. But what you are actually learning is how to erase yourself, how to become a supporting character in someone else's story, how to mistake self-abandonment for devotion. The sixth sign reveals itself in the pattern of your interactions. You find yourself constantly trying to prove your love, your loyalty, your commitment. Nothing you do is ever quite enough. No gesture is sufficient. No sacrifice is complete. You are always one step away from finally earning their full acceptance, their consistent love, their unwavering commitment. You are chasing a finish line that moves every time you approach it. This is not how healthy love operates. In healthy love, your worthiness is not in question. Your value is not something you must prove repeatedly. Your place in the relationship is not something you must earn through constant performance. You are accepted as you are, loved for who you are, valued for your authentic self, not for your ability to meet someone else's ever-changing emotional needs. You begin to recognize that you are living in a perpetual audition for a role you have already been cast in, but the director keeps changing the script. You memorize the lines, you perfect the performance, you give everything you have, only to be told that this is not what they wanted after all. The goalposts shift with their moods, with their fears, with their unhealed wounds that they refuse to acknowledge. You become a shapeshifter, endlessly adapting to meet demands that are themselves endless. This constant proving creates a profound disconnection from your own inner knowing. You lose touch with your instincts, your preferences, your desires. You become so focused on what they need from you that you forget what you need from yourself. Your internal compass begins to spin wildly, unable to find true north because you have made their approval your magnetic pole. The seventh and perhaps most insidious sign appears in how you experience time within the relationship. You find yourself living in a perpetual state of waiting for them to change, waiting for them to heal, waiting for them to finally see your worth, waiting for the relationship to become what you know it could be if only they would try harder, love deeper, choose differently. You are not living in the present moment, but in some imagined future where all the pain will finally make sense, where all the sacrifice will finally pay off. This waiting is not hope. This is suspension. You have put your life on hold for someone who has never asked you to wait, who has never promised that the waiting will end. You have become a person who lives in the space between what is and what could be, and that space is a prison of your own making. In healthy relationships, there is presence. There is an acceptance of what is, coupled with a natural evolution toward what could be. But that evolution is mutual, conscious, and grounded in reality. It is not built on the fantasy that suffering will eventually transform into joy if you just endure long enough. You may notice that you have stopped making plans for yourself. You have stopped pursuing your own goals, your own dreams, your own interests. Everything has become contingent on their readiness, their availability, their willingness to participate in your shared life. You have become a satellite orbiting their emotional planet, and you have forgotten that you are a star in your own right. The trauma bond thrives on this suspension of your autonomous life. It needs you to be available, to be waiting, to be ready to respond to whatever crisis or need arises. It cannot survive if you are living your own life, pursuing your own purposes, finding fulfillment in sources that do not depend on their participation. There is another layer to this pattern that must be spoken. You find yourself defending the relationship not just to others, but to yourself. When moments of clarity arise, when you catch glimpses of how unhealthy the dynamic has become, you quickly push those thoughts away. You tell yourself stories about how special this connection is, how deep your bond runs, how no one else could understand the complexity of what you share. This internal defense system is not protecting love. It is protecting the addiction. It is protecting the familiar pain that has become your identity. You have become so identified with the struggle, so enmeshed with the drama, that you cannot imagine who you would be without it. The chaos has become your normal, and the thought of peace feels foreign, even threatening. You may have noticed that you feel most connected to them during times of crisis, during the moments when they need you most desperately. These moments of intensity feel like intimacy, but they are actually trauma responses. Your nervous system has learned to associate activation with connection, drama with depth, crisis with closeness. You have confused being needed with being loved, and this confusion keeps you trapped in dynamics that deplete rather than nourish. The person caught in a trauma bond often experiences what I call the savior complex. You believe that your love, your patience, your understanding will be the thing that finally heals them, that transforms them, that saves them from themselves. You have cast yourself as the hero in their story, the one who will succeed where others have failed. This is not humility. This is not service. This is grandiosity disguised as selflessness. But here is what the savior complex obscures. You cannot heal another person's wounds. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot sacrifice yourself into their transformation. Healing is an inside job, a choice that each person must make for themselves. Your attempts to save them are actually preventing them from facing their own responsibility for their healing, and they are certainly preventing you from attending to your own wounds. The trauma bond creates a kind of emotional amnesia. You forget how you felt before this relationship. You forget what peace feels like, what joy feels like, what it means to be with someone who adds to your life rather than subtracts from it. You forget that love is supposed to feel good most of the time, that relationships are supposed to enhance your life, not consume it. This amnesia is not accidental. It is a protective mechanism that keeps you from making comparisons that might lead you to leave. If you remembered what healthy love felt like, if you stayed connected to your own needs and desires, if you maintained perspective on what you deserve, you would not tolerate the dynamics that have become your daily reality. You may find yourself isolated from friends and family, not because they have been explicitly forbidden, but because you have gradually withdrawn from relationships that reflect back to you a version of yourself you no longer recognize. You avoid the people who knew you before, who remember your light, who ask uncomfortable questions about your happiness. You surround yourself with people who do not challenge the narrative you have created about your relationship, who do not threaten the delicate balance you have worked so hard to maintain. This isolation is not just social, it is existential. You have become isolated from your own inner voice, your own wisdom, your own knowing. You have learned to distrust your instincts, to question your perceptions, to doubt your reality. You have handed over your power of discernment to someone who uses it to keep you confused, compliant, and available. The trauma bond often manifests as a kind of emotional bulimia. You gorge yourself on moments of connection, of kindness, of hope, and then you are forced to purge when the inevitable withdrawal, criticism, or rejection comes. You live in cycles of feast and famine, never knowing when the next meal will come, never able to relax into the security of consistent nourishment. This creates a desperate hunger that makes you grateful for scraps, that makes you celebrate crumbs as if they were banquets. You lower your standards not consciously but gradually, imperceptibly, until you are accepting treatment that your younger self would have rejected immediately. You become a person who is thankful for the absence of harm rather than insisting on the presence of love. The most dangerous aspect of the trauma bond is how it hijacks your spiritual and emotional growth. You begin to believe that this relationship is your path to enlightenment, that the suffering you endure is somehow purifying, that the challenges you face are opportunities for expansion. You mistake endurance for strength, tolerance for love, and self-sacrifice for spiritual development. But this is not growth. This is stagnation disguised as evolution. Real growth requires boundaries, requires saying no, requires choosing yourself even when it is difficult. Real growth happens when you stop accepting what is unacceptable, when you stop making excuses for what is inexcusable, when you stop waiting for someone else to change and start changing yourself. The trauma bond whispers to you that if you leave, you will never find love again. It tells you that this intensity, this passion, this deep connection is rare and precious, that you should be grateful for whatever you can get. It convinces you that your standards are too high, that your needs are too much, that you are asking for something that does not exist in the real world. But this is the voice of fear, not wisdom. This is the voice of your wounded child, not your adult self. This is the voice that has been conditioned to believe that love must hurt, that relationships must be hard, that you must earn what should be freely given. The eighth sign reveals itself in the architecture of your days. You have become a person who lives in reaction rather than intention. Your schedule revolves around their moods, their needs, their crises. You cancel plans when they are struggling. You rearrange your life when they demand attention. You have learned to be infinitely flexible, infinitely available, infinitely accommodating. And you tell yourself this is what love requires. But love does not require you to be at someone's beck and call. Love does not demand that you abandon your own rhythm to dance to someone else's chaos. Love does not ask you to become a supporting character in a drama that never ends. You have confused responsiveness with responsibility, availability with devotion, and in doing so, you have lost the thread of your own life. You may notice that you feel guilty when you are not thinking about them, when you are not worrying about them, when you are not available to their needs. This guilt is not natural. This guilt is trained. It is the result of a dynamic that has taught you that your primary value lies in your utility to another person. You have become a person who apologizes for having needs, who feels selfish for wanting things, who believes that taking care of yourself is somehow a betrayal of love. The ninth sign appears in the quality of your sleep and dreams. You wake up tired, as if you have been working all night. Your dreams are filled with conflict, with trying to reach someone who remains just out of grasp, with endless scenarios of pursuit and rejection. Your unconscious mind is processing the trauma of the relationship even when your conscious mind is at rest. Sleep becomes not a refuge but another battlefield where the war for your soul continues. This is your psyche's way of trying to solve an unsolvable problem. Night after night, your unconscious attempts to find a way to make the relationship work, to heal the person who will not be healed, to love your way out of a situation that love cannot fix. You wake up exhausted, not because you have rested poorly, but because you have been laboring in your sleep, trying to carry a burden that is not yours to bear. In healthy relationships, sleep is restorative. Dreams may include your beloved, but they do not revolve around crisis and conflict. You wake up refreshed, not because nothing challenging ever happens, but because the challenges that do arise are met with mutual respect, communication, and resolution. Your unconscious mind is free to process the natural complexities of life rather than being consumed by the artificial chaos of dysfunction. The 10th sign manifests in how you relate to your own anger. You may find that you have become a person who rarely gets angry, who prides yourself on your patience, your understanding, your ability to see all sides of every situation. But this is not emotional maturity. This is emotional suppression. You have learned that your anger is dangerous, that it threatens the fragile balance you have worked so hard to maintain. Your anger has not disappeared. It has gone underground, where it festers and grows and turns inward. You become angry at yourself for having needs, for feeling disappointed, for wanting more than you are receiving. You become your own harshest critic, your own cruelest judge. You direct toward yourself the rage that you dare not feel toward the person who is harming you. This internalized anger manifests as depression, as anxiety, as a constant sense of inadequacy. You become a person who cannot tolerate your own company, who cannot sit in silence without being overwhelmed by a sense of wrongness, of failure, of fundamental unworthiness. You have learned to be at war with yourself so that you can be at peace with someone who will never offer you peace. But your anger is not the enemy. Your anger is information. It is your soul's way of telling you that something is wrong, that boundaries are being violated, that you are being treated in ways that you should not tolerate. Your anger is a compass pointing toward your own dignity, your own worth, your own right to be treated with respect and care. The 11th sign shows itself in your relationship with time and memory. You find yourself living in a kind of eternal present where only this moment matters, where the history of harm is constantly being erased by the promise of change. You develop a selective amnesia that allows you to forget the pain of yesterday in the face of today's kindness. You become a person who cannot hold the full truth of your experience because that truth would be unbearable. This is not forgiveness. This is not moving on. This is dissociation. You have learned to disconnect from your own experience in order to maintain the illusion that things are better than they are. You have become a person who lives in fragments, who cannot integrate the reality of what is happening to you because integration would require action, and action would require you to face the terror of change. You may notice that you have difficulty remembering specific incidents, that the details of conflicts blur together, that you cannot quite put your finger on what exactly is wrong, even though you know that something is deeply wrong. This is not a failure of memory. This is a protective mechanism that keeps you from seeing the pattern clearly enough to break free from it. The 12th sign appears in how you experience your own body. You may find that you have become disconnected from physical sensations, that you live primarily in your head, that you have learned to override the signals your body sends you. Your body may be telling you to run, but your mind has learned to interpret that signal as anxiety to be managed rather than wisdom to be heeded. You may notice that you hold your breath frequently, that your shoulders are constantly tense, that you have developed physical symptoms that doctors cannot explain. Your body is holding the trauma that your mind will not acknowledge. Your nervous system is stuck in a state of chronic activation, always ready for the next threat, never able to relax into safety. This disconnection from your body is not accidental. It is necessary for survival in a relationship that requires you to override your instincts, to ignore your intuition, to stay present in situations that every cell in your body is telling you to flee. You have learned to live from the neck up, to treat your body as a vehicle for your mind rather than as a source of wisdom and guidance. But your body is not betraying you. Your body is trying to save you. The tension, the symptoms, the sense of unease, these are not problems to be solved, but messages to be heard. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten, that you are not safe, that this is not love, that you deserve so much more than what you are receiving. The 13th sign reveals itself in your relationship with other people. You may find that you have become a person who cannot be alone, who fills every moment with activity, with noise, with distraction. But paradoxically, you may also find that you have become a person who cannot truly connect with others, who keeps everyone at arm's length, who has learned to perform intimacy rather than experience it. This is because the trauma bond has taught you that intimacy is dangerous, that vulnerability leads to harm, that opening your heart means inviting pain. You have learned to be simultaneously desperate for connection and terrified of it. You reach out and pull back, you invite people in and push them away. You long for understanding while maintaining walls that make understanding impossible. You may notice that your friendships have become shallow, that you cannot tolerate questions about your relationship, that you have learned to deflect concern with reassurance, inquiry with distraction. You have become a person who talks without saying anything, who shares without revealing, who connects without truly meeting. This is not introversion. This is not privacy. This is protective isolation. You have learned to hide not just from others but from yourself, to avoid the mirror that healthy relationships provide, to stay in the familiar prison of your trauma bond rather than risk the uncertainty of authentic connection. The 14th sign appears in your relationship with hope and despair. You may find that you cycle between extremes of emotion, that you swing from believing that everything will work out to feeling that nothing will ever change. This is not the natural ebb and flow of human emotion. This is the roller coaster of intermittent reinforcement, the addiction to the high that comes after the low. You have learned to live for the moments of connection, the brief periods of peace, the fleeting glimpses of what the relationship could be if only the other person would change. These moments become your drug, your reason for staying, your evidence that the relationship is worth the pain. But these moments are not representative of the relationship. They are the exception that proves the rule of your suffering. In healthy relationships, there is a baseline of respect, of care, of consideration. There are ups and downs, but there is not this extreme cycling between paradise and hell. There is not this desperate clinging to moments of kindness as if they were life preservers in an ocean of indifference or cruelty. You have become a person who lives in the space between hope and despair, never fully experiencing either, always suspended in the anxiety of not knowing which will come next. This is not living. This is existing. This is surviving. And you were meant for so much more than mere survival. The 15th sign manifests in your relationship with your own future. You may find that you have stopped making plans, stopped dreaming, stopped believing in possibilities that do not include this person. Your future has become hostage to their willingness to change, their readiness to love you properly, their decision to finally see your worth. This is not devotion. This is self-abandonment. You have given away your agency, your power to create your own life, your right to pursue happiness, regardless of someone else's choices. You have become a person who waits for permission to live, who needs approval to dream, who has forgotten that your life belongs to you. You may notice that when you try to imagine your future, you cannot see yourself clearly. You can see them, you can see the relationship, you can see the fantasy of what it might become, but you cannot see yourself as an individual with your own path, your own purpose, your own possibilities. You have become a satellite in someone else's orbit, and you have forgotten that you are a star in your own right. This loss of future is perhaps the most tragic aspect of the trauma bond. It steals not just your present, but your potential. It takes not just your peace, but your purpose. It robs you not just of love, but of the capacity to love yourself enough to choose differently. But here is what the trauma bond cannot take from you: your essence. Beneath the confusion, beneath the pain, beneath the endless cycles of hope and disappointment, you remain whole. You remain worthy. You remain capable of love that does not hurt, of connection that does not cost you your soul, of relationships that add to your life rather than subtract from it. The recognition of these signs is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your awakening. It is the first step on the path back to yourself. It is the moment when you stop running from the truth and start walking toward your freedom. You are not condemned to repeat these patterns forever. The trauma bond, for all its power, for all its insidious grip on your psyche, is not your destiny. It is your teacher, your dark initiation into the deeper mysteries of your own soul. But like all teachers, it has served its purpose when you have learned its lessons, and now it is time to graduate from its curriculum of suffering. The 16th sign reveals itself in how you experience your own success and joy. You may find that you have become a person who cannot fully celebrate your achievements, who feels guilty when good things happen to you, who unconsciously sabotages your own happiness. This is because the trauma bond has taught you that your joy is somehow a betrayal of the relationship, that your success threatens the delicate balance you have worked so hard to maintain. You dim your light not because you lack confidence, but because you have learned that shining too brightly activates their insecurities, their envy, their need to cut you down to size. You have become a person who apologizes for your gifts, who minimizes your accomplishments, who has learned to make yourself smaller so that someone else can feel bigger. This is not humility. This is self-erasure disguised as love. In healthy relationships, your partner celebrates your success as if it were their own. They delight in your joy. They encourage your growth. They want you to shine as brightly as possible because they understand that your light does not diminish theirs. They do not see your happiness as a threat, but as a gift, not as competition, but as inspiration. But in the trauma bond, your joy becomes evidence of your selfishness, your success becomes proof of your lack of loyalty, your happiness becomes a weapon used against you. You learn to hide your victories, to downplay your achievements, to feel guilty for any moment when you are not focused on their needs, their struggles, their pain. The 17th sign appears in your relationship with your own intuition. You may find that you have become a person who second-guesses every instinct, who questions every feeling, who has learned to distrust the very wisdom that could save you. Your intuition tells you something is wrong, but you have been trained to interpret that knowing as paranoia, as insecurity, as your own failure to love properly. You have become a person who asks others what they think instead of consulting your own inner knowing. You seek validation from friends, from family, from strangers on the internet because you have lost faith in your own ability to discern truth from fiction, love from manipulation, safety from danger. You have handed over your power of discernment to the very person who benefits from your confusion. This is not wisdom. This is not open-mindedness. This is self-betrayal. Your intuition is not broken. It is being systematically dismantled by someone who needs you to doubt yourself in order to maintain control. Your inner voice is not paranoid. It is trying to protect you from a danger that your mind refuses to acknowledge. The 18th sign manifests in your relationship with your own needs and desires. You may find that you have become a person who cannot identify what you want, who has no preferences, who has learned to want what they want, to need what they need, to desire what they desire. You have become a mirror that reflects back their wishes while your own fade into invisibility. This is not selflessness. This is not love. This is the systematic erasure of your individual identity in service of a relationship that demands your disappearance. You have learned to find your desires through theirs, to meet your needs through serving theirs, to exist only in relation to their existence. You may notice that when someone asks you what you want, you feel panic, confusion, a blank emptiness where your preferences should be. This is not because you are naturally selfless. This is because you have been trained out of wanting, conditioned out of needing, programmed out of desiring anything that does not serve the relationship. The 19th sign shows itself in your relationship with conflict and resolution. You may find that you have become a person who will do anything to avoid confrontation, who apologizes for things that are not your fault, who takes responsibility for problems you did not create. You have learned that peace at any price is preferable to the chaos that comes with standing up for yourself. But this is not peace. This is submission. This is the silence of the oppressed, not the harmony of the connected. You have learned to swallow your truth, to suppress your needs, to sacrifice your dignity on the altar of avoiding conflict. You have become a person who would rather betray yourself than risk their anger. In healthy relationships, conflict is not avoided, but navigated. Differences are discussed, not dismissed. Problems are solved together, not shouldered alone. There is an understanding that temporary discomfort in service of truth is preferable to permanent resentment in service of false peace. The 20th sign appears in how you experience your own emotions. You may find that you have become a person who cannot feel your feelings clearly, who experiences emotions as if they were coming from underwater, muffled and distorted and confusing. This is because you have learned to feel their emotions as if they were your own, to carry their pain as if it were your responsibility. You have become an emotional sponge, absorbing everything around you while losing touch with what originates within you. You feel anxious but cannot identify why. You feel sad but cannot name the source. You feel angry but immediately suppress it before it can provide you with information about what needs to change. This emotional confusion is not a character flaw. It is a symptom of a system that requires you to be more attuned to someone else's inner world than your own. You have learned to read their emotional weather while becoming blind to your own climate. You have become a person who knows their moods better than your own feelings. The 21st sign reveals itself in your relationship with time and presence. You may find that you have become a person who lives in a perpetual state of emergency, always ready for the next crisis, always anticipating the next emotional storm. You cannot relax into the present moment because you have learned that safety is an illusion, that peace is temporary, that catastrophe is always just around the corner. This hypervigilance is not anxiety, this is adaptation. You have learned to live in a state of constant readiness because experience has taught you that emotional violence can erupt at any moment. You scan their face for signs of displeasure. You listen to their tone for hints of irritation. You monitor their energy for shifts that might signal danger. This is not the natural alertness of love. This is the traumatic activation of survival. You have learned to live as if you are always under threat because in many ways you are. The threat is not physical but emotional, not external but relational, not obvious but insidious. The 22nd sign appears in your relationship with your own boundaries. You may find that you have become a person who cannot say no, who feels guilty for having limits, who has learned to view boundaries as selfishness rather than self-care. You have been trained to see your needs as impositions, your limits as failures of love. This is not kindness. This is not generosity. This is boundary collapse. You have learned to give what you do not have, to offer what you cannot afford, to provide what is not yours to give. You have become a person who is available to everyone else's needs while being unavailable to your own. In healthy relationships, boundaries are respected, not violated. Limits are honored, not pushed. No is accepted as a complete sentence, not treated as the opening argument in a negotiation. Your right to have needs, to set limits, to protect your energy is not questioned, but celebrated. The 23rd sign manifests in your relationship with your own truth. You may find that you have become a person who cannot speak honestly, who edits your words before they leave your mouth, who has learned to tell people what they want to hear rather than what you actually think or feel. You have become a person who lies not to deceive, but to survive. This is not diplomacy. This is not kindness. This is self-censorship born of fear. You have learned that your truth is dangerous, that your authentic voice is unwelcome, that your real thoughts and feelings are threats to the fragile peace you have worked so hard to maintain. You may notice that you have different versions of yourself for different people, that you shift and change and adapt depending on who you are with and what you think they need from you. This is not versatility, this is fragmentation. You have broken yourself into pieces to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold your wholeness. The 24th sign shows itself in your relationship with your own body and sexuality. You may find that you have become disconnected from your physical self, that you experience your body as a tool for someone else's pleasure rather than a source of your own joy. You have learned to be present for their desire while being absent from your own. This disconnection is not spiritual transcendence. This is dissociation. You have learned to leave your body during intimate moments, to float above the experience rather than feel it fully. You have become a person who performs sexuality rather than experiences it, who gives pleasure while receiving none. In healthy relationships, intimacy is mutual, consensual, and connected. It is not something you endure, but something you enjoy, not something you give, but something you share. Your pleasure matters as much as theirs. Your comfort is as important as their satisfaction. Your presence is as valuable as your performance. The 25th sign appears in your relationship with your own future self. You may find that you have stopped believing in your own capacity for growth, for change, for evolution beyond this relationship. You have become a person who cannot imagine who you might be if you were not defined by this dynamic, who you might become if you were not consumed by this connection. This is not loyalty. This is not commitment. This is stagnation disguised as devotion. You have confused staying with growing, enduring with evolving, surviving with thriving. You have become a person who is so invested in who you are within this relationship that you cannot imagine who you might be outside of it. But your identity is not dependent on this connection. Your worth is not determined by this relationship. Your future is not hostage to someone else's willingness to change. You are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own narrative, the creator of your own destiny, the architect of your own becoming. The 26th sign manifests in your relationship with your own power. You may find that you have become a person who feels powerless, who believes that your happiness depends entirely on someone else's choices, who has forgotten that you have agency, that you have options, that you have the right to choose differently. This powerlessness is not real. It is learned. It is the result of a system that requires you to believe you are helpless in order to keep you trapped. You have been taught that love means surrendering your power, that devotion means abandoning your agency, that commitment means accepting whatever is offered to you. But love does not require powerlessness. Love does not demand helplessness. Love does not ask you to give up your right to choose, to change, to leave if leaving is what your soul requires. You have more power than you remember, more options than you can see, more strength than you have been allowed to feel. The 27th sign reveals itself in your relationship with your own healing. You may find that you have become a person who believes that healing can only happen within this relationship, that growth can only occur through this connection, that your wounds can only be tended by the person who inflicted them. This is not healing, this is repetition. This is the wounded child's fantasy that the parent who hurt them will eventually love them properly if they just try hard enough, wait long enough, forgive completely enough. But healing does not happen in the presence of ongoing harm. Growth does not occur in the soil of continuous trauma. Your healing is not dependent on their participation. Your growth is not contingent on their approval. Your wholeness is not something they can give you or take away. You are not broken because of this relationship, and you will not be fixed by staying in it. The 28th sign appears in your relationship with your own worthiness. You may find that you have become a person who believes that you deserve this treatment, that you have somehow earned this pain, that you are not worthy of better. You have internalized the message that love must hurt, that relationships must be hard, that you must prove your worthiness through endurance. This is not humility. This is not realism. This is self-hatred disguised as acceptance. You have learned to see yourself through the eyes of someone who cannot see your value, to judge yourself by the standards of someone who refuses to treat you with basic respect and care. But your worthiness is not up for debate. Your value is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Your right to be treated with kindness, respect, and care is not something you must earn, but something you inherently possess by virtue of being human. The 29th sign manifests in your relationship with your own dreams and aspirations. You may find that you have become a person who has stopped dreaming, who has forgotten what you wanted before this relationship consumed your life, who cannot imagine pursuing goals that do not include this person. This is not partnership, this is absorption. Your dreams matter, your goals are valid, your aspirations are worthy of pursuit, regardless of whether they fit into someone else's vision for your life. You are not meant to be a supporting character in someone else's story, but the protagonist of your own. The 30th and final sign reveals itself in your relationship with your own intuition about love itself. Deep down, beneath all the confusion and justification and rationalization, you know that this is not what love is supposed to feel like. You know that love should not leave you feeling empty, exhausted, confused, and small. You know that real love should add to your life, not subtract from it. This knowing is not naive. This knowing is not unrealistic. This knowing is the voice of your soul, the whisper of your truest self, the memory of what you came here to experience. Love is not supposed to hurt this much. Love is not supposed to cost this much. Love is not supposed to require this much of your essence in exchange for so little nourishment. But perhaps the most important truth of all is this: recognizing these signs is not a condemnation, but a liberation. Seeing these patterns is not a reason for despair, but a doorway to freedom. Understanding these dynamics is not an ending, but a beginning. You are not broken for having experienced this. You are not weak for having stayed. You are not foolish for having loved. You are human. You are learning. You are growing. And most importantly, you are not alone. Millions of souls have walked this path before you, have recognized these signs, have found their way back to themselves. The trauma bond is not your destiny. It is your teacher. And the lesson it has come to teach you is this: you are worthy of love that does not hurt, of connection that does not cost you your soul, of relationships that celebrate your wholeness rather than demand your fragmentation. The path forward is not easy, but it is possible. It begins with seeing, with naming, with acknowledging what has been hidden in plain sight. It continues with choosing, with deciding, with taking the first small step toward reclaiming your life. And it culminates in remembering, in returning, in coming home to the truth of who you are beneath all the roles you have played, all the masks you have worn, all the ways you have learned to disappear. You are not a trauma bond. You are not a wound. You are not a problem to be solved or a project to be completed. You are a soul having a human experience, and that experience is meant to include joy, peace, authentic connection, and love that feels like coming home to yourself rather than losing yourself in someone else. The signs are clear. The patterns are visible. The choice is yours. What will you do with this knowing? How will you honor this recognition? Where will you direct this newfound awareness? The trauma bond has taught you what love is not. Now it is time to discover what love actually is. And that discovery begins with learning to love yourself enough to choose differently, to demand better, to walk away from what diminishes you and toward what celebrates the magnificent being you have always been. Your story is not over. In fact, it is just beginning. The real love story is not between you and someone who cannot love you properly. The real love story is between you and your own soul, between you and your own life, between you and the infinite possibility that awaits when you finally remember who you are and what you deserve. The trauma bond ends where your self-love begins. The healing starts where the hurting stops. The freedom emerges where the prison dissolves. And that moment, that choice, that possibility is always available to you. Always. Even now. Especially now. The trauma bond whispers its final seduction as you stand at the threshold of recognition. It tells you that this intensity, this consuming passion, this desperate need, this is what great love stories are made of. It convinces you that the poets wrote about this kind of suffering, that the artists painted this kind of longing, that the musicians sang about this kind of heartbreak. But this is not the love of legends. This is the love of wounds speaking to wounds, of emptiness calling to emptiness, of fear masquerading as devotion. You may find yourself romanticizing the pain, telling yourself that anything worth having must be fought for, that real love requires sacrifice, that the depth of your suffering is proof of the authenticity of your connection. But love does not require you to bleed. Love does not demand that you sacrifice your essence on the altar of someone else's brokenness. Love does not ask you to prove your worthiness through endurance of harm. The trauma bond creates its own mythology, its own sacred texts written in the language of suffering. It tells you that you are different, that your love is special, that no one else could understand the complexity of what you share. It whispers that leaving would be betrayal, that healing would be abandonment, that choosing yourself would be selfish. But these are not the words of love. These are the words of fear, of desperation, of a system that requires your participation to survive. There is a moment in every trauma bond when the mask slips completely, when the illusion can no longer be maintained, when the reality of what you are experiencing becomes so undeniable that even the most skilled storyteller cannot craft a narrative that makes it acceptable. This moment is not a failure. This moment is a gift. This moment is your soul's final attempt to save you from a fate that was never meant to be yours. When that moment comes, and it will come, you will have a choice. You can look away, you can create new stories, you can find new ways to justify what cannot be justified. Or you can see, you can acknowledge, you can name what has been unnamed and claim what has been unclaimed. You can choose to believe your own experience over someone else's words, your own knowing over someone else's promises, your own worth over someone else's judgment. The trauma bond is not love. It never was. It is a counterfeit, a shadow, a distortion of the real thing. And you, dear soul, you were not born to live in shadows. You were not created to love distortions. You were not meant to settle for counterfeits. You were made for the real thing, for love that feels like coming home, for connection that adds to your life rather than subtracts from it, for relationships that celebrate your wholeness rather than feed on your fragmentation. The healing begins when you stop trying to heal them and start healing yourself. The freedom emerges when you stop trying to change them and start changing your relationship to what you will and will not accept. The love story starts when you stop trying to earn love from someone who cannot give it and start giving yourself the love you have been seeking in all the wrong places. You are not condemned to repeat these patterns. You are not destined to remain trapped in these cycles. You are not sentenced to a life of loving people who cannot love you back. The trauma bond is not your fate, it is your teacher. And the lesson it has come to teach you is this: you are worthy of so much more than what you have been accepting. The path forward is not about finding someone else to complete you. It is about discovering that you were never incomplete to begin with. It is not about learning to love better. It is about learning to love yourself enough to demand better. It is not about healing your wounds so that you can attract healthy love. It is about recognizing that you are already whole, already worthy, already deserving of love that does not hurt. The trauma bond ends where your awakening begins. The prison dissolves where your awareness expands. The suffering ceases where your self-love starts. And that moment, that choice, that possibility is not somewhere in the future. It is here. It is now. It is available to you in this very instant. You have seen the signs. You have recognized the patterns. You have named what was unnamed. Now comes the most important part. You must choose. You must decide. You must act. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when they change or when things get better or when you feel stronger. Now, in this moment, with this breath, with this heartbeat, with this recognition burning bright in your chest, the trauma bond is not your love story. It is the prologue to your love story. The real story begins when you choose yourself, when you honor your truth, when you walk away from what diminishes you and toward what celebrates you. The real story begins when you remember that you are not here to be consumed by someone else's darkness, but to shine with your own light. The signs have been given. The patterns have been revealed. The choice has been placed before you. What will you do with this knowledge? How will you honor this recognition? Where will you direct this newfound awareness? The trauma bond has taught you what love is not. Now it is time to discover what love actually is, and that discovery begins with you. It begins with this moment. It begins with the revolutionary act of choosing yourself. The trauma bond has shown you its face. It has revealed its mechanisms. It has exposed its hunger. And in that exposure, you have been given the greatest gift possible, the gift of sight. You can see now what was once invisible. You can name now what was once nameless. You can choose now what once felt impossible. But sight without action is merely spectacle. Knowledge without application is merely entertainment. Recognition without response is merely intellectual masturbation. The trauma bond does not release its grip simply because you have identified it. It does not dissolve simply because you have understood it. It does not disappear simply because you have named it. It requires something more. It requires the sacred act of choosing yourself. This choosing is not a one-time event. It is not a single moment of clarity that solves everything. It is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment decision, a continuous returning to the truth of who you are beneath all the stories you have been told about what you deserve. It is the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding your relationship with yourself, of learning to trust your own knowing, of remembering that your worth is not negotiable. The trauma bond will not go quietly. It will fight for its survival. It will whisper that you are making a mistake, that you are throwing away the best thing that ever happened to you, that you will regret this choice for the rest of your life. It will remind you of the good times, the moments of connection, the promises that were made. It will tell you that you are being dramatic, that you are overreacting, that you are destroying something beautiful. But these are not the words of love. These are the words of addiction speaking to addiction. These are the voices of two wounded children who have learned to find comfort in familiar pain rather than risk the uncertainty of genuine healing. These are the echoes of old programming, ancient wounds, ancestral patterns that have been passed down through generations of people who confused intensity with intimacy, obsession with love, suffering with devotion. You must learn to distinguish between the voice of your trauma and the voice of your truth. You must learn to hear the difference between the whisper of your wounds and the song of your soul. You must learn to trust the knowing that lives in your bones, the wisdom that speaks through your body, the intelligence that flows through your intuition. Your trauma will tell you to stay. Your truth will tell you to go. Your wounds will tell you to settle. Your soul will tell you to soar. The person you have been bound to is not your enemy. They are not evil. They are not a monster. They are, like you, a wounded soul who has learned to find connection through familiar patterns of pain. They are, like you, someone who has confused need with love, desperation with devotion, control with care. They are, like you, someone who is repeating the only version of love they have ever known. But understanding does not mean staying. Compassion does not mean tolerating. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. You can have empathy for their wounds without allowing those wounds to wound you. You can have compassion for their pain without making their pain your responsibility. You can wish them well without tying your well-being to their healing. The trauma bond is a teacher, but it is not a life sentence. It is a mirror, but it is not a prison. It is a portal, but it is not a destination. It has shown you what you came here to learn, that you are worthy of love that does not hurt, that you deserve connection that does not cost you your soul, that you are meant for relationships that celebrate your wholeness rather than feed on your fragmentation. The healing that awaits you on the other side of this recognition is not the healing of the wound. It is the healing of the one who carries the wound. It is not the transformation of the other. It is the transformation of yourself. It is not the fixing of what is broken. It is the remembering of what was never broken to begin with. You are not damaged goods. You are not a broken person who needs to be fixed. You are not a project to be completed or a problem to be solved. You are a soul who has been temporarily confused about what love looks like, who has been momentarily lost in the maze of trauma and conditioning, who has been briefly seduced by the familiar darkness of old patterns. But confusion is not permanent. Being lost is not a life sentence. Seduction is not destiny. You can find your way back to yourself. You can remember who you are beneath all the roles you have played, all the masks you have worn, all the ways you have learned to disappear. You can return to the truth of your own magnificence, your own worth, your own right to be loved in ways that feel like coming home to yourself. The trauma bond ends where your self-love begins. The prison dissolves where your awareness expands. The suffering ceases where your sovereignty starts. And that moment is not in the future. It is not waiting for you somewhere down the road. It is here. It is now. It is available to you in this very breath, in this very heartbeat, in this very moment of recognition. You have the power to choose differently. You have the right to demand better. You have the strength to walk away from what diminishes you and toward what celebrates you. You have the wisdom to know that you are worthy of love that does not hurt, of connection that does not cost you your essence, of relationships that honor the fullness of who you are. The signs have been revealed. The patterns have been exposed. The choice has been placed before you. What will you do with this knowledge? How will you honor this recognition? Where will you direct this newfound awareness? The trauma bond has taught you what love is not. Now it is time to discover what love actually is. And that discovery begins with the revolutionary act of loving yourself enough to choose freedom over familiarity, truth over comfort, sovereignty over surrender. Your real love story is not behind you. It is ahead of you. It is waiting for you to remember who you are, to reclaim your power, to choose yourself with the same fierce devotion you have given to others. The trauma bond was never your destination. It was your detour. It was never your fate. It was your teacher. It was never your prison. It was your portal. Now walk through it. Walk toward yourself. Walk toward your truth. Walk toward the love that has been waiting for you all along. The love that does not ask you to disappear, but invites you to shine. The love that does not demand your sacrifice, but celebrates your wholeness. The love that does not require you to prove your worth, but recognizes it as inherent, immutable, and infinite. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning. This is where your real life starts. This is where you remember that you were never meant to be consumed by someone else's darkness, but to illuminate the world with your own light. The trauma bond has served its purpose. It has taught you what it came to teach. Now it is time to graduate. Now it is time to choose. Now it is time to come home to yourself.